We would love to have, your stories too.
Like, when my dad was, each one of us, when he taught us to drive, his favorite thing was over to the left a little.
I'll go back over that way. Okay,
All right.
are we ready, Lloyd?
Yep, you're going.
Okay. Good afternoon, I'm Mary Saltarelli, and I am here with Diane Locke and Lloyd Dodd, and Steve Monroe.
I'm Steve Monroe.
And today is February 26th, 2020. And we're interviewing Steve Monroe for the first time. And this interview is taking place at Bridge Street History Center in Granbury, Texas. And it's sponsored by the Bridge Street History Center Oral History Project. So, hi Steve.
Hi.
Yeah.
That was very nice.
So I want to start with, when did you come to Granbury and what brought you here?
We came here when I was in the 5th grade. My dad was raised here. Met my mother up in Bowie, Texas, but we lived in Fort Worth. So he decided, this is in 1960, that Fort Worth is just getting way too big. So we'd go back to Granbury, which had a whopping 2,800 people. So we came here, and I had to leave Fort Worth and all of my art classes because they didn't do art in Granbury then.
Right.
Anyway, we survived. And I went away to TCU, and I had finished TCU, and I watched all the, was it 1970, I think, Mary Lou came down here and started prowling around and
Let me,
looking into, yeah.
can I ask, do you
Yeah.
mind if I ask a
No.
period? So you graduated from Granbury High
Yes,
School?
I did.
What
Granbury High
year?
School, 1969.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you were here when they won the state
I
championship?
was, when the dam closed and the lake filled up overnight.
Yeah.
And my mom was running the newspaper. That my mother and Norma Crawford were really good friends.
Okay.
So Norma was in Europe and my mother was in charge of the paper.
What was your mom's name?
Betty Monroe.
Okay.
And mother had,
Go ahead.
What was her maiden name?
Robertson. She was from Bowie.
Oh,
And mother had to write the story about the lake filling up because they didn't expect it to. And she had to call Waco and get the rules and regulations and do a special edition of the paper that week for voters and whoever, because here we had a lake and nobody knew what to do with it. Overnight, literally. I mean,
Yeah.
that
It
story.
filled up a lot
Yeah.
faster, yeah. Well,
So-
other people don't know the story.
Well, true.
So why don't you share it with us?
So it was just here, and a lot of farmers lost equipment. There are tractors and
Because it
dirt
rained,
movers. Yeah.
correct,
Yes,
and filled it up
and it
sooner.
so there's no telling what's under there if anybody were to really start scuba diving and stuff. But anyway, shortly after that, Mary Lou Joe Nutt had come to town, and he was Mary Lou's cousin. So she came down from Dallas to visit, and she went, So I guess she bought the Nutt house first, or she and Joe did together, perhaps, I don't know. But she got to looking at the rest of the square, so Mary Lou being Mary Lou, just walked around and said, hey, how about we get together and fix this place up? Because they were boarded up windows. Everything you heard was true. I mean, it was pretty dismal. The Opera House didn't have a roof on it, and so pretty pitiful. And Mary Lou, pretty much on her own, got that going. And then pretty soon after that, the newspaper, the Hood County News, I worked there, and a little bit during high school and all of my TCU years, I lived at home and drove back and forth and worked at the Hood County News part-time.
Okay.
So I was right in the middle of
Right.
it all, really.
Yeah.
Mary Lou and I got to be great buddies because I could do hand-done artwork, signs, and all that kind of stuff. She loved that, because it was the
Yeah.
old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
But, so we got to be good buddies, and then one day, I was in the back of the newspaper office on the north side of the square. I guess where the downtown store was. I don't even know what's in that building right now. Right along the middle of the north side.
Right. It's,
Probably a realtor.
is it the bookstore now? I think
I
so.
don't even know.
Was that Janice?
It looks,
That's Janine's, yeah, old building, where the bookstore is.
Oh, okay, so it's
Okay.
one over from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where the real estate, it's a real estate office. Okay.
okay. Anyway, I was in the back one day, and here comes this big old white Cadillac up the alley and stopped next door at the back. And this lady, classy looking woman, got out of the car and she said, "How do you do? I'm Janine," and I don't remember what her name was then. She was not Macon. And I said, "Hello, Janine." And her daughter was with her, who was beautiful. And she said, "I'm about to open a dress shop here." Really? So we got to be buddies, and she and Mary Lou hit it off like nobody's business. And, you know, they were quite the team before it was all said and done.
Yeah, they were.
But then so I kept doing TCU and back and forth. And I got done at TCU, and it was 1974, and by that time the Hood County News had been taken over by an out-of-town firm who didn't care about Granbury history. They were about making money, you know, like big. So my old friend Burl McClellan, who had been the publisher at Hood County News, said, "I'm gonna start my own paper." So he did. He started something called the Village Weekly, and it was tabloid size, and it was old. I did a masthead, an old-timey looking, and we started our own paper. Well, Janine and Mary Lou loved it because we were on the square and we'd throw them, you know, and just did everything the old-fashioned way. And so Burl, in November of '74, Burl came. We were walking around the square. It was a cold November afternoon. I don't know how I remember all this like I do. And he said, "You know, there's an old gal that's in town visiting, playing golf." And I knew Claudine Hemstraw because she had bought the Aston house from Gene and Charlie Kate and moved in here from Cooperstown, New York. And I thought, she must be so. Then I found out she's from Weatherford, Texas, actually. But she lived in Cooperstown, you know, so whatever. But
Who was from Weatherford, Texas, actually?
Claudine,
Okay.
she grew up there.
Okay.
And she had been a Navy nurse, and she met a man in the Navy from Cooperstown. And she said to me one time, she was divorced from him when she got here. She said, I said, "Well, what did your husband do?" She said, "Oh, he was a baker." Whatever. Well, a good friend of hers was here, but she said, "Yeah, he was a baker like Mrs. Baird was a baker." She's way underselling that, you know. So anyway, but Claudine invited a friend of hers from Cooperstown to come and play golf. Well, her name was Joanne Miller. So Burl told me, he said, "This old gal," and you know, you remember Burl, both of you.
Oh, yeah.
"This old gal," he said, "is down here to play golf," and said she was walking around the square and she found that old Opera House building and said, "She's just all over it." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "She's determined to do something with it." So we were walking around the square. It was cold November afternoon, windy and rainy. And we walked by the Opera House, and he goes, "That's her right there." She was sitting inside there on a pile of lumber. She had on a sweatshirt and jeans and those Wellington boots and a cigarette, of course. He said, "You need to meet her." Okay. So we went in, and she was fun, you know, loud and boisterous. And she said, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I work with this guy. We have a newspaper." "Well, what do you do at the paper?" And I said, "Well, I'm the graphic designer." "Oh, honey," she said, "we need to talk." There it went. Probably the first 2 or 3 years, I didn't get a dime, but it was so much fun. Oh my God.
And what did you do?
I did all the posters and all of the playbills and did the press releases and mail outs and all the newspaper advertising and just anything that, you know.
Wow.
But I also let it be known that when I was in junior high school here, there were 2 girls that rode my school bus, and they did each other's hair on the way to school every morning. And I watched them, and I learned how to do hair. Rank amateur. But Joanne said, "You can do hair." Oh. So I wound up being the wig master and all this nonsense. Anyway, it was just, that's kind of how it all, but it was just,
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
One is, what did you do during the restoration project, or
Okay.
it's really a rehabilitation project,
The
or
truth is,
revitalization?
that November is when I met her. And in December, the school system started this thing called community education. And it was for adults wanting to learn a new skill or most of it was hobby type stuff or fun. Well, Joanne found out about it and she said, I'm gonna do a class in theater, arts and crafts and we'll meet on Saturday mornings in the Opera House. And I thought, alrighty, that sounds like my kind of thing.
Did they already have the roof on it by that time, or?
Barely. They had started work, but it was just a big old hollow shell. Of course, they were in there all through the week.
Yeah.
What we mostly did was clean up after the construction people.
During the class?
But
Yeah.
we loved every minute of it. And I tell you who it was me and Norma Crawford and Doris Luton and Patsy Walton, Ralph Walton's wife, and a girl named Kim Harris who was a hairdresser here. And I wish I could remember. There were at least a dozen of us. But we worked our tail ends off every Saturday morning. It was cold, of course, no heat in there. Frozen, but we'd go to the Nutshell and drink coffee and then go back and hit it again. And Joanne was there, but she was usually busy. But once in a while she'd tell us a little something about theater, just enough to make it legitimate. While she was working us to the bone.
Well, did you work with Joe Nutt at all in his endeavors?
Not really.
But he was very involved.
He
in that
was
also.
kind of the,
Did she enlist him in the effort, Joanne? you think?
no, in fact,
Or-
she wanted to run with it herself and he kind of insisted on being in the middle of it. I mean,
Yes.
and
I think Mary Lou brought him more.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And, but Joanne was the one who knew how to go and get money. There were four, when the construction started, 4 people, each put up $25,000. And so for $100,000, the building was
Wow.
bought. Can you imagine?
Do you do you remember who those 4 people were?
Joe was one, of course. And I think Mary Lou probably was one. And my gosh, maybe Howard Clemens,
Oh,
I'm not sure. And I would be willing to bet the Lutons were, because John and Doris both were. John just from financial, but Doris was in the middle of everything.
How about that guy Claude, that owned the ranch, the Black Ranch, or worked at the Black Ranch?
Clyde Wells.
Clyde West.
Now Clyde could have been, I don't know for sure. He was always on the board and stuff. But there were 4 main ones, each $100,000. Well, then they had the big old empty building, and it was kind of, well, now what? Because they didn't want to go any more than that, that much, any more money than that. Joanne said, let me just see what I can do. So she got on the phone, and she called the Carter Foundation, Ammon Carter's group, and they said, we'll give $25,000. And the Moody Foundation in Galveston, she explained to them what she was trying to do. They said, oh yes. And then the Hoblet Foundation in Dallas, she knew somebody there.
The what?
Hoblet,
Huh.
Hoblitzelle, I believe. And I don't remember what their big deal was. But one of the others was Fort Worth, was the DAVOIL, DAVOIL. That was Cullen Davis and his brother Bill. They were still.
I didn't know that.
Yes, right. Oh yeah. Yes, we got money.
I didn't know that.
So
Wow.
each one of those people contributed $25,000, and I did the playbill, so I had all that info, and
Yeah.
But it was, and she, of course, wanted to manage the money and Joe wanted to be in charge of the money. But Joe wanted to do grand, bronze this and whatever. Joe said, no, we need seats, we need a stage, and we need to be selling tickets. That's how we do it. Well, they fought a lot, they really did. I'll just say that because, and Joe finally, said, I think I better let her do what she wants to do. But she went to Fort Worth, she went to Texas Steel one day, drove over there in her little Chevy Monza, drove right on to the lot where all the scrap steel was, and found a 15-inch I-beam that was long enough for the balcony.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I want that. Well, lady, how do you think? She said, I'll find a way to get it down there. She talked about it, they gave it to her. There is no telling what.
Oh, wow.
She said, well, hell, I want to get rid of it. That's what it was. But there were so many things like that she just knew. She found out one of the old theaters in downtown Dallas was being demolished. She got their seats.
Wow.
350 of them and brought them down here, and by gosh. But almost just with scrap, she was able to do that. And Joe Nut was freaking out. He'd scratch his head like, I can't believe she's doing that. She hadn't spent any money. But she just had a knack,
Well, she knew a lot of people too. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Yeah, she did. And
Even though she was from New York, she knew a lot of people down here.
yes. Well, see, she was a native Texan for herself, but she went to New York when she was, she went to Columbia to study architecture, not architecture, archaeology. She was all about, and while she always could sing, she never had a lesson, she always had a voice though, and somebody she knew was going to be gone. They had a gig at a nightclub in New York, and they were going to be gone the weekend, and she said, won't you let me come sing? Well, the crowd went berserk, and they were just like clawing at her and stuff. Who are you, and where'd you come from? And that's how her career started. But she knew, I mean, she'd been around the block a time or two. In fact, just this week, y'all remember Casey, the chef that used to be here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a message from Casey this week. She's back in Florida. She found on eBay or somewhere an original 8x10 black and white photo of Joanne Miller from 1962 when she appeared at Don McNeil's Breakfast Club in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
She had jet black hair. It was a Vidal Sassoon cut, the original photograph.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
for sale on eBay. And Casey said, I want this for Christmas. And I said, well, you better find somebody richer than me. I don't know that I can afford it.
Did she buy it?
I don't know if she did or not. I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
I mean,
How much did they want for it?
The bidding was at $10 then, and I know it's going to go because she's fairly well known,
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of her stuff on YouTube now. And
Joanne Miller?
Mhm.
Huh.
So,
I mean, we'd love to have it here.
Yeah, that's what I was
yes,
thinking.
oh, yeah.
Any old playbills or things like that you
Mhm.
have?
Yeah.
The museum?
We've got the original playbill from 1970 that you must have done.
I did, yeah.
It's
Oh,
in the
cool.
archives.
Somewhere, I believe I have one from every year. If I can find them, I'll bring them here because,
Yeah, I know, it's like.
as
I
time
have
goes on
collect-
with me, tell them what happened with,
Right.
Yeah. But,
So I've often heard, and read, I wasn't here during it, the
Mhm.
restoration.
Yeah.
I came in, well, I was actually here in 76.
okay, so
January.
yeah.
I was in Fort Worth for 2 months and then came here in
So
January.
you were here about the second
76.
season.
Yeah.
We opened in 1970. One of
But-
the things, great.
Oh, my question was, we've always been told that it was a community-wide effort.
Pretty much.
But would you say she was the driving
Oh, yeah.
force
With Bob leaps and
Okay.
bounds, yeah.
with financial investment from leaders in the community?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But if you were to count what she was able to acquire for free and put a value on it, oh my Lord, she was by far the biggest contributor, because,
Was she good at rallying the local people?
yeah. She was most of them. There were a few little old ladies that were like, she's got a body,
Yeah.
she kind of.
Kind of. She was.
She was, one of the funniest people I ever knew in my life, and I guess that was one of the big draws. But we used to in that theater class on Saturday mornings, we would speculate, what on earth, how could she transform what we were working with to a stage personality? How could that possibly happen? Because she was always in the boots and the sweatshirt and, the cigarette hanging out and stuff, and cussing and. Well, on June the 19th, she had amassed a band. It was time for the opening concert.
1975.
Uh-huh. And I think we stayed there all day the day before, making sure everything was spit and polished. And we could not wait until the next night because they had the searchlights out front, and it was grand. And
Yeah.
the tickets were gold, and it was really uptown.
Do you have
So-
one of those?
Hmm?
Do you have one of the tickets?
I should have half of one because they ripped it in half and gave me the other half. So my seat was center of the balcony. So I had, and the drape was drawn, and all of a sudden this music started, and it was like this excitement that just. I don't know how to describe it. Goosebumps everywhere, and whatever. And that curtain opened, and oh my Lord, perfect gray hair, makeup, full-length beaded gown, and a microphone with a cord. She would never, to her last day, she would not use a cordless mic. She didn't believe them. They didn't have the quality.
Yeah.
And she started singing, and people were gasping. It was in Granbury, Texas. Good Lord.
It was a quality of entertainment
it was
nobody had seen.
way beyond anything we could imagine.
Yeah.
And then she was like, well, hello there, and just down to earth.
She was a performer and an
I
entertainer.
mean, she
wasn't
was,
she?
yes, hysterical. And the show, of course, was an amazing success. And then they went on and did the first 4 or 5 years. They did 4 musicals every summer. They only lasted 3 weeks. She'd always say, "We're learning one, performing one, and forgetting one all at the same time." Couldn't have been.
And she did use a lot of local talent.
A lot, yeah.
Taught,
And,
and that was kind of like learning
Mhm.
on the job. Like
Yeah.
Regine Cage,
sure, oh my gosh,
she's turned into a performer. And
she
I
was
don't
a
know.
fine actress. She
Yeah,
really is.
yeah.
You named some other people the other day on the phone that I didn't recognize their names. It was a lady that you mentioned.
Well, now Jean was one, but Doris Luton. Doris did a lot of shows, and
There was
Oh.
somebody from
Ruth
Arlington, you
Smith?
said.
Ruth. I don't think Ruth ever got on stage,
Oh,
but she wrote some songs and stuff, some music.
somebody from
You
Arlington.
mentioned.
Oh, Sharon K. Garner
Yes.
now Sharon K. was a student from Howard Payne, but she came up here and took this place by storm. She was like a young Carol Burnett, that rubber face,
Yeah.
and just hysterical. She could do anything in the world, and so she was a real significant. And Sharon K. went on to, well, she graduated from Howard Payne, and she was from Arlington, so she went back to Arlington and became the first director of the drama department at Martin High School, and just retired last year after 22 years
Oh, wow.
with the school.
That's
But anyway,
wonderful.
but I see her a lot now, so
Yeah.
it's really fun. And David Perez was the technical director, and David went on to do movies. He was a cameraman and in charge of cameras for a lot. He did several movies with Liz Taylor before she died, and
Wow.
he went on and did, and a lot of people from here have kind of
Big
gone
time.
on and made somewhat the big time,
Mhm.
and but it just, I hope Joanne was as proud as she should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the way it all ended was not too cool either, so I
Yeah.
hope she was able to get past that and not.
That's
But she stayed, Joanne and I stayed buddies, and I was with her an hour before she died, so we stayed close.
Did you all have a sense when, so the opening of the Opera House and the opening of the Nut House and the opening of Janine's store all caused this huge revitalization
Yes,
for
yes.
Granbury. Did you all have a sense when you were working together on, say, the Opera House, building the, construction in the Opera House, did you have a sense of what was happening?
Not really, not initially. Now, as people started to come down and look around, well, for example, when second summer, I guess, she decided to do Pal Joey, which was it's kind of risque, just a tad. I mean, it's younger man, older woman, you know the show. Well, Cynthia Brantz had come to town by then, and Cynthia knew all of Fort Worth, she was a big part of Fort Worth society. Cynthia said, why don't you talk to Georgianne Carter about playing that role? And Joanne said, what? Miss Society herself? Cynthia said, you'd be real surprised. In her boredom over the years, she has taken voice and dance lessons extensively, and said she's an incredible performer. Of course, a raving beauty on top of that. And Cynthia said, well, you call her, I don't even know her. And Cynthia called her, she said, oh my Lord, yes. So she came down and played the lead in Pal Joey. Well, here came all the Fort Worth Society to see her, hoping to see her make a fool of herself. No, she wowed them all.
And that brought attention to Granbury.
Oh, big time. There was huge coverage in the Star Telegram because the Carters happened to have owned it too at the time. And then Joanne went, well, that worked out pretty well. Let's see who else I can. So that's the way she got a lot of the attention, was to book.
Oh, wow.
And Sharon Kay, my little friend I mentioned a while ago, Theater Arlington has been in kind of, so they asked Sharon Kay to direct a show there. This was just last year. And she said, I got to thinking about our good old days at the Opera House. And she said, my husband and I happen to be good friends with Arlington's mayor and his wife. And she said, I knew that he had taken a lot of drama classes in college. So she said, I booked him in a show. And here came all of Arlington's government and anybody who was anybody in Arlington. And that theater is going nuts now. So
that's a smart.
She said, I stole that idea from Joanne Miller.
Hey, good ideas.
Whatever works.
When did you realize the impact it was going to have? That it was bringing about a resurrection? So.
Probably within early the next year, because initially we were just going to be open in the summers. Well, in September it's like, you can't quit now. And so she booked a Dixieland concert starring herself and brought a Dixieland band down. Well, they just killed it. It was a 9-piece and it was older guys and they knew their stuff. And they loved her because, she could sing all that old stuff. And she'd do When the Saints Go Marching In and, Just a Closer Walk and all that. And just be all over the stage, but drew crowds. And how we ever got away with it, I'll never know. There were 2 folding chairs at each end of each row, out into the aisle. The fire marshal would have a stroke today if they tried to do something. But we packed them in like you can, and people standing against the wall.
In the back, yeah.
And up in the balcony, hanging off of the rails. And it was crazy. And nobody ever, including Joanne, ever dreamed that it would.
Did Cynthia do some of the curtains?
Yes,
Painted the
curtains? Sets, And Cynthia came up with this idea that, and she said a lot of the old theaters in vaudeville days and stuff would have what they called an oleo curtain, O-L-I-O, and it would roll down. It was more like a drop than a curtain with advertising on it. Joanne's like, can we charge for advertising? Yeah. So let's do it then. So,
I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cynthia and I painted that curtain. We put it upstairs at Janine's because she didn't have the apartment up there.
Yeah.
And we stretched it out in that floor and painted up there and then rolled it up and got the guys to carry it down the stairs.
Oh, wow,
And then-
Steve, you've worked with a renowned artist. I mean,
I know, when they're amazing.
that is, I mean, that's amazing, yeah.
But you know what, this is kind of funny, because Cynthia, for all she could do, and I'm not sure she was telling me the truth, she always said she could not do lettering. She could draw anything, she wasn't good with lettering, but I was. And she would call me to do lettering on stuff. When you talk about feeling honored,
Oh,
oh my
gosh,
Lord.
yes.
Just put my little touch on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but she did a lot of posters for, after I was going to Dallas, well, I don't know, the General Granbury's birthday and those kind of things. Well, honey, I found a picture, but I can't do that lettering, you know how that is, so could you just come down this weekend and we'll work on it? Sure. Here I came, you know.
So when did you leave to go to Dallas?
I left in '77, oddly enough, but everybody else, that first company was leaving. Well, I thought, I need to go with him, you know, because we'd gotten to be like a little family or something.
Oh, okay.
And I had always kind of wanted to go see what Dallas was all about anyway. Joanne she cornered me in that we had the Four Doors Down Club going by that time, you know.
That was great.
She cornered me back there and she said, okay, I can understand these other jerks leaving me, but I wouldn't have thought in a million years that you would leave. Now what the hell's wrong? Well, she let me have it with both, and I said, what if I keep doing what I'm doing, but just from over there? Well, honey, that's an awful long way to drive. And I said, I have a brand new Mustang GT, and I look for reasons to get to drive it, so let's just do that.
So
I did every poster from June '75 to the end of 1996.
Whoa.
Wow.
Every poster for every show. And
Wow.
the playbills and, you know, all of that stuff. But never anything so much fun. And part of it was the work, part of it was being around her, and of course Cynthia was just, you know, amazing.
Yeah.
And most of the kids, now once in a while we'd have a little snot that we didn't care for, but most of the kids I call them, I was a little older than them by that time, good people. And but some of the stuff, Joanne was in rehearsal one day, there was a little girl from TCU, pretty child, and it was a crowd scene, and Joanne was, you know, it was rehearsal, and she was watching. Well, that little girl, I don't know what was wrong, she had the foulest look on her face. Everybody else is all, you know, this girl. Joanne looked at her and she said, smile, honey, you look like you just bit into a bad shrimp. Well, everybody just died. I bet to this day, that little girl smiles every chance she gets. She never forgot that.
When did they start, the Opera House, start working with college?
The very first year, Tarleton was, that was another thing, Joe Nutt was like, well, how are you going to pay all these people to come? We're not going to pay them. We're going to teach them. They can learn as they go. And so she called Clyde Wells, I believe, because he was on the board at Tarleton. And he said, well, I'll take you to meet the drama director. So drama director and about 25 kids packed up when school was out and came up here. And they stayed in the old Shanley house the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And there was barely electricity over there. It was dismal. It was full of bugs and, you know, just horrible. By the second year, she had acquired the old hospital building. And so everybody moved into there and thought they had died and gone to heaven.
That was palatial in comparison.
Yes, believe it or not. Heat and air conditioning and all the good stuff. But those kids
Did they always do Tarleton, or was it?
No, they did Tarleton the first 2 years. And the truth is, the Tarleton director, and I loved her, but she and Joanne were enough alike that they butted heads fiercely. So Joanne said, I think we need to give other schools a chance. That's a great way to...
Yeah. So then TCU.
So TCU came in.
Okay.
Well, TCU, of course, had big bucks and, you know, a matter of equipment to share and stuff. So that worked out great, and their director came down, and he he was a guy, and he was willing to take orders from Joanne, so it was so much better, you know. And they were several seasons TCU was. And then she kind of just opened it up, and there were a few kids from schools all. She would go to that, what is it called in January at the Fort Worth Theater. They have auditions, the kids come from all around, and she could go over there and hand pick a group. But there were kids from San Marcos and kids from Oklahoma, you know, OU and Texas A&M and Texas Tech, and there'd be kids from all over the place. So it really was a variety and worked out very well. But she never had to pay anybody, which was great.
When did she start having shows for the children here in the schools here? Because at Christmas time every year she had that
They
show.
did.
And then she had the theater school in the summer.
I'm trying to remember. That was toward the end for Joanne because she wasn't really that into all of that, and I think Jake Jacobs and his wife maybe were the ones who really pushed for that.
Okay.
And I think it could have done probably more than it did if she had gotten behind it. It just wasn't her thing though somehow, and y'all want to do it, go ahead, you know.
Okay.
But that's kind of how that, and
How that came about.
Yeah.
Well, when did the other buildings on the square start getting? So first it was the Nut House, then Janine's restaurant,
Yep.
and then the Opera House.
It was before that, it wasn't at the bakery?
yeah, now right along about the same time, the Nutshell,
Yeah.
Lou Brooks.
I started.
Right.
Lou was a character. I'm telling you now. She was in there with Mary Lou, and Lou came from Fort Worth, and she had been. Bob Bolin was the mayor of Fort Worth, and Lou was his next door neighbor, and she had been his campaign manager, and she also co-owned a bicycle shop and a Hallmark store with Bob Bolin. Well, she decided to come down here, and she opened the Nutshell, and the whole front half of the building at the time, she made a toy store with real nice, real, you know, educational type toys and stuff, and the food was in the back,
Okay.
and it did very well, and
And so then the Opera House. So then they just started.
and Mary Lou got the Nut House, the restaurant, going really well. Well, then Cynthia Brantz and her friend Betty Blake from Rhode Island had bought the Cuckoo's Nest, the old theater building. And Mary Lou came over and looked at it, and she said, I want that upstairs. I want to put a restaurant in there. And Cynthia said, all right, tell me more. So that's where the Cuckoo's Nest came in. And she hired Cliff Cook to run it. And it did extremely. It was different enough to the Nut House, but they swapped customers and stuff, and so it really came along too.
And then the Four Doors Down.
The Four Doors
Explain
Down.
what that is to
Well,
people who might be watching.
After we got kind of comfortable at the Opera House, we realized how totally poverty-stricken we were. Nobody was. Some of those kids, I swear to you, now they were getting college credit, and that's what they were all about, and they were having the time of their lives on top of it. They would go to that old grocery store where
David's. Yeah.
because they had Parade brand macaroni and cheese for $1 a box. And those kids, and I've seen this a million times, go in that dorm, and they would have one of those cheapo paper plates, you know, those kind that, and a whole box of macaroni and cheese. That was their dinner before going back and doing the Saturday night show. And I said, y'all, they can't be all that healthy. It's that into your little system anyway. But we all realized how poor we were. So somebody, and I swear I don't remember who it was, it may have been David Perez, the technical director, came upon the idea of a dozen of us pooling our money and getting enough signatures and getting a liquor license and opening a club under the Cuckoo's Nest. Well, we went to Joanne, and she said, only if I can be a part of it. So she got in the middle of it with us, and we went to, it was called Granbury State Bank at the time. whatever its name is now, Morgan. And there was a lady working there, and she said, of course, she said, I'll guarantee, each one of us borrowed $1,000 and put that up. And she said, I will guarantee every one of you's notes, but I want the charter membership. Well, okay then. So they would rush from the stage, when the show was over at the Opera House, they would rush up the alley and go in the back door there and be on that little stage and do shows till 1 o'clock in the morning till they forced us to close down, But we did very well off of it. I mean, it was exactly 4 doors from the Opera House, so we named it the 4 Doors Down. And it just, I mean, those were the good old days.
It took off. Oh, wow. I loved it there. We went there several times. I didn't go to the Opera House as much as I went to the Fort Worth.
Refreshments were all up there.
And you got the same quality entertainment.
Sure did, as a matter of fact. But I've got to tell you all this tidbit. When Georgianne Carter was here Georgianne came back the next year and did Maine, and she played Auntie Maine. Q-A-T. Amazing. And Joanne played Vera. So the two of them together on, But Georgianne, the whole time she was here doing a show, she would get to the Cuckoo's Nest first and get up in the balcony and start pushing tables together. And then she'd hang off the rail and watch the front door. And anybody Opera House, come on up here, honey, Mr. Rich Bitch is paying tonight. Well, of course everybody would die, they all and every one of them to a person would just get schnockered. But I love it, Miss Rich Bitch is paying.
That's pretty nice. Did you ever perform?
Never, ever.
Did she ever try to talk?
Yes, she did everything in her power. And one time we were going to they did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And it was such a good, tight little show. And Ricky Pratt played Woodstock. He was part of the...
Yeah.
And they were going to take the show to Goldthwaite, Texas, to a Baptist church. David Riggins was one of the pioneers, and he played Charlie Brown. And his grandmother went to the Baptist church in Goldthwaite, and she said, I will pay all of you's way, and I'll pay all of you handsomely if you'll bring that show and do it for my church. Well, off we went. But Ricky couldn't go. And Joanne called me late at night. I had an apartment over here. And she called me and she said, honey, this is not what you want to hear, but I know you love me. Oh no, what? You knew when she started out that way. She said, you're going to have to play Woodstock. And I said, I am not. I was skinny enough. I am not. And she said, you have to. We can't disappoint David Riggins' grandmother, and we can't do the show without Woodstock. So I called Sharon K. Garner, my friend that I was talking about. She was like this big around, and she was in school at Howard Payne. And I said, and I'd start out just like Joanne. I said, Sharon K., I know that you love me. And she goes, oh God, what do you want? So I told her, she said, oh sure, what time do you want me there? Saved by the bell. That's as close as I ever came to have to get on stage and do it. Now, after a show was over, I didn't mind walking on and presenting flowers or anything. If I had to say anything, I'd die. I don't know why.
It wasn't your thing. You're an artist.
Not at all.
You're
more than happy to stand backstage and do whatever I could. We did, the second year, I guess, they did Annie Get Your Gun. And they had this girl from Tarleton that played Annie Oakley. She could sing. My Lord, that girl could sing. She was an old farm girl. She looked the part. Mm-hmm. She was a veterinarian major at Tarleton, headed for Texas A&M. She could not act. She could sing. She could not act. And she could not remember lyrics. Well, Joanne would have me stand backstage with the book. And they did 27 performances. And the song Can't Get a Man with a Gun, she never sang it the same way twice. One night she was just looking off into space and she said, oh, you can't get a man in the tail with a quail. And she just spit out words. So it's like, oh my Lord. Anyway, there was some backstage stuff.
When did she start doing melodramas?
The very
What
first show.
brought those around?
The very first
They
show.
were her
Golden
idea.
in the Hills.
Yeah.
Yep. And people just loved it. They just raved about it. It was different.
Yeah.
That was the only time she'd allow food in the theater. People were allowed to throw popcorn.
Why did she start the sing-alongs?
Now that I don't know. They were
very
part of the
first.
very first show.
Yeah.
And I really don't know where that came from. Maybe a vaudeville thing.
No.
I'm not sure about that, but they were incredibly popular.
Oh,
And
gosh,
Tom
no.
was the first leader of that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Tom on the banjo and
Tom Hafford.
Tyford, and little Mo Todd on the piano.
Yeah.
And once in a while there would be, Drenda, as a matter of fact, Drenda played the tuba in the high school band. And Joanne bought an old tuba somewhere and made Brenda get out there and play tuba in the sing-along. She hated every minute of it, but everybody loved it, you know. And
I can just see Dorinda playing the tuba. No.
And when did you come back from Dallas?
in 1988, I stayed 10 years over there, and 11, I guess. And I went to work at KERA in their art
Oh, wow.
department and loved it, loved
I
every minute
bet,
of it.
yeah.
Just talk about creative, crazy people, crazy. But again, very no money, dismal pay. But, and then I started freelancing for a lot of agencies downtown. And then I got real uppity and just would specialize in nonprofit, like the Dallas Downtown Association and Dallas Arts District and all those things. Paula Peters was a girl who was here. You remember Paula?
Mhm.
Okay, Paula was in Dallas by then. And Paula was with the Downtown Association, and she got me all of their work, and then it spread from there. And I was just naming my own price and just really blowing and going. Well, in late '86 is when that oil crunch hit. Everybody stopped making those big fat donations, so all of a sudden nobody wanted a fancy annual report anymore, or
Yeah.
way overpriced stuff. Crap. And at the same time, Joski's in Houston bought out the Singer Harris chain. Well, Singer Harris in Dallas had their own art department of 27 graphic artists. When Joski's bought them, they fired every one of them. Well, all of a sudden there were 27 people just like me roaming the streets looking for work, and I thought, might be time for me to get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
So I called Joanne Miller, and she said, honey, I believe it's time to come on back home. So I called my dad, and I said, what do you think about this? And he said, what if I told you I just leased a cattle ranch and I've got 600 cows over by La Pan, and I need somebody to go out there every day and drive around and look and be sure nobody died overnight. And he said, would you be interested in going? And I said, yes, why not? So I did, and I started doing more stuff for the Opera House and doing stuff for my dad. Then I started doing stuff around town, painting signs and that kind of thing. So that's how it all kind of came about.
Wow.
Here I still am.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah, but it.
So how would you describe the impact that the restoration of, or rehabilitation of the Opera House had on Granbury?
I think it was a lot of people who were not necessarily Opera House fans, and there were some who weren't, would try to say that the lake and the dam brought everybody here. I disagree. I totally disagree. There's a lot more culturally.
Do you think the Opera House and the historic preservation downtown brought a lot of people?
At least as many as the lake did. I honestly do. Because, you drive around the lake and you go, there's some nice neighborhoods. There's some not so nice neighborhoods. They brought all of that too.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear Mary Kate Durham's famous line? When the dam closed and the lake filled up, the trash floated in. She was quoted in the Star Telegram, haven't said that.
That's right.
Great.
And that's what Mary Lou said she was worried about. That's when she started
Yeah,
talking about historic preservation ordinance downtown.
yes.
And listing the square on the National Register
Mhm.
because she was concerned that
Well,
what did she call the fish bait and tackle shops would
Mhm.
take over
Yep.
the downtown
she
historic.
told me she had a nightmare one night that McDonald's bought the Masonic Lodge building over here, and we're gonna tear it down and put a golden arch up there.
And she worried about that
She did.
for the rest of her life.
Yeah,
You
she
know,
sure did.
yeah.
What do you think they would think now
Whew.
if they came back to Greenville? Joanne, Mary Lou,
Some-
Janine.
Some of it would really disappoint them. Some of it I think they'd be pretty pleased about. Some of the, and you probably would agree with me on this, Mary, some of the signs on the square, from what we tried to do and what we tried to hold together,
Yeah.
man, did it ever go south after we were off of it, you know.
And Diane.
And you too, you know.
Mhm.
Some of those signs, I
Diane
just
was
go,
on mine.
seriously? Lord.
It's what they're allowing with historic houses too,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
so.
Do you know, those little signs on the nutshell, or I painted those in 1992 and they are still hanging there. Can you believe that? No wonder I went out. No wonder I went out of business. I didn't get any repeat.
You did such
I was
high
too
quality
good.
work. Yeah.
But yeah, they're still, and they were in compliance with all of them. Because I understood what y'all were doing, and I didn't try to go up against you. I mean, why would, you know?
Yeah.
I get it. But I used to sit there and listen to those other people try to fudge on this. And I was the one that had to go to Shirley Hooks when she moved down here. And Century 21 was stark black and stark white. Neither one of those colors were on the palette.
Yeah.
And I said, Shirley, oh, this is corporate. And I said, you know what? That bunch doesn't give a rip about corporate. I just want to tell you that. They don't care. But I went, Shirley called them, and they sent two guys from wherever Century 21's headquarters, Connecticut or someplace. They sent two guys down here, and we met in Shirley's conference room. And I talked them into that darkest brown that we had and that lightest off white, and that's what we got to use. And I did her something. But it wasn't that much trouble. And it was kind of fun going up against it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway. It was a fun,
The good old days.
good old
Yeah.
days. And I've wondered a million times, what if I had never met Joanne that afternoon? Where would I have gone and what would I have done? I shudder to think, because there's no way it could have been anything that could possibly compare to all this. So
It was meant to be.
I was where I was meant to be that afternoon for sure. And
Well, you helped her too, I mean.
Yeah.
You've had, and I think that all of you had a tremendous impact on Granbury, your work, your enthusiasm, your love of the community.
Yep.
Because like you said, nobody was making a lot of money.
No, heaven.
And I think not only did you have a huge impact on the community, but you did on other people as well. Look at the impact she had on you,
Yes.
and vice versa,
Yeah.
you had on her.
We could go at it, and we did disagree. Not often, but sometimes. But she told me one time, she said, "You're one of the few that can match me," and I've got to hand it to you on that. We got mad at each other one day about something. I don't know what it was, and she said, she says, "You know what I bet?" And I said, "What?" She said, "I bet you when I die, you're going to spit on my grave."
Gosh.
And I said, "No, I won't. I don't want to have to stand in line." And she goes, "Ooh." She said, "You're good."
I want to ask you about the events in Granbury. Which ones do you remember started first, and how were you involved in it?
Like what kind of?
4th of July,
Oh,
General Granberry's birthday.
okay. The first, well, I see, in the middle of all this, I did a ton of volunteer work for the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And which reminds me, did you know John Halsey died?
No,
Yeah.
Saturday afternoon.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Aw.
John was big Mr. Chamber then, you know,
Yeah.
that's what made me think of. The 4th of July, the first one was in 73, I believe. And I think it was Gene and Charlie Kate, and maybe Charlie and Isabel Walker, and Dick and Jane Wagley, and Burl and Dave McClellan. I think those 4 couples were the main ones that said, why don't we do a parade and do whatever? And that third space on this side of the square from the bank was open. That was the drive-through bank then.
Mhm.
You could drive under and so they got a grill in there, and somebody got a deal on buffalo meat, and they served them buffalo burgers. They were hideous. They were like shredded wheat. The more you chewed, the bigger the color. You know, somebody didn't know how to cook it, I guess. But anyway, but they did a 4th of July, and I did some. I bought poster boards because they were kind of flexible, and you could put them on the side of a car. But we had the Grand Marshal, and we had, you know, the best float and the best whatever.
Mhm.
And I stood over there. The Burlesville Village Weekly paper had a building on the west side of the square at the time. But I stayed up all night. I saw the sun come up the day of the parade because I was still making signs.
Signs for the
Yeah.
parade. Wow.
And so I did that with the chamber until, well, even some of that I did from Dallas. They'd call me and say, you coming down this weekend? Yeah, well, could you come a little early and bring these signs? We'd only need 25 of them. Oh, great. You know? So, but I did. I couldn't say no.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you remember when the bean cook-off started?
I may have been in Dallas at the time, and I kind of think that was Diane Rawls, was it?
No,
No?
no, it started before her. The merchants, what do you remember about Howard, I think, was somehow
Oh, maybe
involved.
so,
and started-
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he may
Howard
well have been.
Clemens.
Yes, he may well have been.
Tell me about, so you don't remember that. Do you remember when the Merchants Association started or anything about that?
That was along about early to mid '80s, I think.
Okay.
And
So
Kathy
you
Smith
weren't
was
in-
the,
Yeah.
I think, the first head of the Merchants Association, wasn't she?
No, well, she was the first employee.
Okay, yeah.
But not the first.
Okay.
It started,
No, but you know
it
what?
started in the late 70s. I
Mary,
think.
you're right, because I do remember now, when I had my apartment over here, Mary Lou, one Christmas, about a week before Christmas, she said, okay, who all doesn't have plans Christmas Eve night? Well, a whole bunch of people didn't. She said, let's have a merchant's dinner at the Nut House. But she said, I'm not gonna cook, so let's make it covered dish. So everybody brought food, and we just,
Mhm.
and it was the loosely formed Merchants Association.
I have a document here that was written about all the revitalization by the Texas Historical Commission.
Ooh, yeah?
And they said that the Merchants Association was started as an anti-parking meter.
I never knew that. I wouldn't be surprised.
To go to the city and get rid of the parking meters.
I wouldn't be
And they were
surprised.
I remember
successful.
that, but, I mean.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and they were successful, and that's when they took them down to the old power plant. and put 'em down
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
there.
Wow. But-
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it all kind of, I think, came about after those first seeds
Mhm.
were planted,
Yep.
you know.
And
Do you
Yeah.
remember much about the courthouse restoration
yes, well, a good little bit. And there's been so many.
since then?
Yeah.
Yeah. To
With the
save the
penny-
clock tower.
With the pennies
Yeah.
for schools.
Because I started a rumor, I'm so ashamed to admit. They brought this gigantic commercial dumpster down and parked it on and they took those 4 faces of that clock and leaned them up inside that dumpster and you could see them. Well, people were just like, what is that about? And I started, this is so embarrassing, but I'll tell it anyway. I started telling around town like it was true that they were going to put digital faces up there.
When was this? In 1969? When they were?
No, it was after that. Didn't a storm hit it and kind of rock it a little bit?
Yeah, that was that
It
was
was
it.
then.
Yeah.
But people were like, "Are you kidding me?" just hearing their voice. No, it's not really. I'm just joking.
That's enough to cause an uproar.
But I don't know. There were so many. The thing that has hacked me so are people that would come in and just swear they knew it all, and we've had several of those.
And they've only been here about 5 minutes.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
You're right. And
What was it Norma used to say? Norma Crawford, we've been holding it together
yes,
until you got here.
that's right.
We've just been holding it together here, waiting for you to arrive.
Well, there was a woman that worked in the courthouse, and she was telling the wildest stories about, well, this was this and this. No, it wasn't. I was here and you weren't. But
Oh, I bet I know who that
yeah,
was.
I'm sure you did.
I think you do too.
To this day, I just get cold chills when I see her.
Well, I don't have any more questions. Do you, Diana?
Well, I have an observation, but I bought from Cynthia Brandt's estate a painting that is on heavy canvas.
Uh-huh.
And it's speculated that she painted it and it was one of the curtains.
Could have been.
And it's of a lady with her toes in the water with lily pads around it. Could you look at it and
Maybe so. I sure might be able to.
and just because I've been telling people that I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it was one of the parts of the canvas
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the drapes. And so
It very well could have been.
It's really heavy.
That's another thing. Cynthia and I, separate and apart from the Opera House or any of the rest of it, Cynthia and I got to be buddies somehow. And after Joanne was not at the Opera House anymore, poor thing, she went into a depression that her life was not good from then on, because that was her life, you know.
Right.
And so I went to visit a lot, and then Joanne had a stroke and had to be put in a nursing home, and I would go with Cynthia, but I would also go on my own to see her. She was in Glen Rose, and I went as often as I possibly could, and I could make her laugh, and we'd get to talking about silly stuff that happened, and we'd laugh and stuff. Well, then when Joanne died, she had come up here to the what's it, Trinity, whatever it's
Right.
up there, that old one. She was up there, and they called Sunday afternoon. They called Cynthia and said, not looking good, and she called me and she said, you want to go up there with me? And I said, yeah. So we did, and sure enough, that night Joanne died. But Cynthia, and I think Cynthia lived another 4 years. We had a deal that on Friday nights we went to dinner together, unless either one of us got a better offer. And it was okay with it. But rarely did that ever happen. We were Friday night dinner buds. Always Dutch, we just, did our thing. But in the midst of all that, I got acquainted with Cynthia's sister and her niece in Fort Worth. And I'm still very close to them, and I just love it. But
Oh, that's nice.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really
her niece is
nice.
my same age. and
Yeah.
so it's very fun. But Cynthia she was a character in her own right.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, yes.
I've always wished that I had bought a piece of her art.
Mm-hmm. She gave this to me. I have one of those little folded paper horses that's cast in bronze.
Oh.
And it's on a walnut block about that big, and he's about this big, but he's folded paper and then in bronze, and it's number 4 of only 10. So
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
just treasure.
Yeah, I bet.
And then I have a print of the charcoal she did of the old Iron Bridge,
Yeah.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
that you have
and
that.
it's signed and numbered to me, so that's kind of fun too.
Mhm.
That's one of the darkest ones that she did of that old bridge. I mean, the others are light, and that
Mhm.
one is,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a copy upstairs of that, too. So,
yeah.
One thing I have is Mary Lou's brother's artwork
Mm-hmm.
that I bought from Diane. That came from the house. He was a metal artist. And do you know his name? Do you remember?
I
his name?
should, and I
Garland?
can't think.
Garland was his first name.
Yes.
Faulkner.
Faulkner? Okay.
Yes,
Mhm.
sure was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he lived in Florida for a while.
I think so.
Uh,
There are so many, as you mentioned, from early Granbury, so many talented people in this little
Yes,
town.
incredible.
And that brought so
Yeah.
much culture to
Yes.
the community.
Yes.
And enriched it
Mhm.
greatly.
Yeah. It's this is so silly, but I used to, when I do a car trip, I'd go through little towns and I think, what have y'all got? Nothing looks like. We're Granbury, we got all this.
Do you have any, I mean, we all know that, you know, the guy came and told Mary Lou, oh, hell, Mary Lou, let's just mark the whole square for the marker for, you know.
Historic,
O'Neill
yeah.
Ford for the
Yeah,
National
yeah.
Register.
Yes.
It was O'Neill Ford. Do you remember when he came to the
Do you
school?
remember anything specific except that's always been said?
That he, no, not really. I do know that the reason that became so urgent is because Joe, her dear cousin, wanted to bulldoze the entire south side of the square and build a condominium complex over there that went all the way down to the water. And Mary Lou said, over my dead body, you do that. And
This was before he got involved in the Opera House.
no, it was after.
After?
After. And he,
Wow.
well, see, even Joanne had locked horns enough that I don't know what there might have been a way to get back at her too. I don't know.
Mm.
Joe had a wicked side, he really did. But
Mm.
I don't know. But
Mhm.
anyway, she got attended to as only
Yeah.
she could.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bless her heart.
Yeah, she did great.
She could, I'll tell you.
Anything else? Any memories?
Oh, there's a jillion of them I could go on.
Do you have a favorite?
I don't know. Probably not. Just
Have you
well,
told-
now one time in the summer, and it was about the third summer. My birthday is right in the middle of July, on the 8th, not the middle, but on the 8th of July, and I don't make a big deal, you know. You get a certain point, you don't make a big deal out of birthdays. So it was a show night, and there was stuff going on, and Joanne she was a horse's butt all day. I didn't know what was wrong, just foul mood, and I just, lady, you know, and at intermission during the show, I was, because I would run down from the light booth. That's another thing I did, was run a follow spot. If it was a musical, I was always running a spotlight because nobody else to do it. And I would run down the stairs and sell cider at intermission. So I'm over there selling cider. And Joanne came over with that foul look on her face, and she said, I need you to come over to my house after the show. I need to talk to you. What in the world have I done to you, you old bat? And I almost said that. Okay, fine. So I worried a little bit about it, and then I stopped worrying. You haven't done anything that you shouldn't have done. And so I went over there, and the house was almost dark, and I thought, if she's going to bed and I wake her up, it's going to be that much worse. But I thought, I don't care. So I rapped on the door, and she came over and opened the door, and the lights flung on, and the whole company was there. Happy birthday! I said, oh, the jerk you bald headed. I don't know how she would do, but she had the whole company. Everybody was in on it. Good thing. Redeemed herself.
Just,
But it was, I don't know how it could have been a more fun time, you know. And,
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the nutshell version of it all, I guess.
Do you have any questions? Any more questions for me? Do you, Lloyd?
No.
Do you- Well, thank you
You're so
for
welcome.
your
Thank you all. This was great fun.
service to Granbury and
Yeah.
for letting us interview you about it. We really appreciate it.
It was great.
there was he must have been 6'2", and he was probably weighed 125 pounds, and he was in The Myth and the Mummy.
Greg Wilkerson.
Yes,
Yes.
I remember him,
He was-
and I don't even know why.
He was something else. He really was.
But I guess I remember him from living at the Opera House.
Right, at the dorm.
At
Yeah,
the dorm.
yeah.
And, but he was so funny.
He was funny as funny could be. And he married that girl named Julie Jarvis that was such an incredible
Oh,
singer.
yeah.
You remember
Yes,
Julie?
I do remember that
Julie
name.
was a distant cousin of Joanne's, they found out while she was here, of
Oh,
all things. Julie's daddy
yeah.
and Joanne were somehow related. But anyway, Julie and Greg got married, and it didn't last real long. And Julie married her high school sweetheart, and they live in Gulf Breeze, Florida now, and they're both in real estate of all. I don't know. With a voice like that, you're in real estate. What a crime!
That's
That's
that
the
is
way it's
fun.
gone with the
Yeah.
bunch of them.
Is he still around?
Greg,
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I haven't seen or heard tell of him in quite a while.
Quite a while.
But he was funny as
Yes, I remember him.
yeah.
The first, oh, go ahead.
Of all those, you know, the stage was crowded when the Myth and the Mummy, and I don't know why, you know.
He probably stood out.
Yes.
Half a head taller than the rest of them. Yeah.
I remember the first show I ever saw was in 1976
Yeah.
in July 4th,
What was
4th of July. And it was a melodrama about the railroad tracks.
Yes.
What was the
Dirty
name
Work
of
at
it?
the Crossroads.
That was it? Dirty
Yes.
Work.
Yes.
Who was that guy who played the villain? He was
Jerry
awesome.
Abbott.
Jerry Abbott?
He was
Okay.
from TCU.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
He was
Oh,
great.
he's excellent.
He had
Yeah.
those boots on. He was tall and handsome.
he had a hiss that would just.
Yeah, he was a great villain.
He really
We were
was,
all
yeah.
hissing at him.
The mustache.
Uh-huh. Quite a character. I just saw him last year. He kind of disappeared.
Oh, really? He's
And
still
everybody was
around?
like, well, what became of Jerry? 'Cause, you know, we all look at Facebook, and if they're not on Facebook, well, are they dead or what? You know, surely. And I was, since I've been staying with my folks, my dad every day reads the obituaries. He said, I got to find out if I'm in there. You know,
Yeah.
so I've taken it the habit too, because it's,
Mhm.
well, all of a sudden, about a year ago, upper left is Ann Abbott. Well, I remember Jerry's mother. And I looked, and he was listed as a survivor. And I thought, well, he's still with us. And the service was at Greenwood in Fort Worth, and I told my folks, I said, I'm going, and it's not just out of curiosity, because I knew Jerry very well, and I knew his parents, and when I said, I'm gonna, well, I went, and he was his same old self, just healthy as could be, and
Is he still performing?
he doesn't do anything. He's
Oh.
retired. He taught drama
He was so good.
at Polytechnic High School in Fort Worth, which is almost all black.
Oh, good for him.
And I thought, I would love to have sat in on one of those. You know, but of course, he's got that knack, you know, he just,
Yeah.
and I bet they loved him,
Oh,
you know, and, but he always was a jogger, and he busted his hip jogging, and I think that's what led to his maybe early retirement.
Yeah.
But he lives over in Willow Park now and just kind of putzes around.
But these are all the names that we need because we hope to have a birthday party for the Opera House.
Oh, wow.
And to bring all the old actors.
Oh
To-
my
to-
gosh.
to-
When
And
what are you
so,
thinking?
In June,
June?
I think that's the,
That's the,
1975.
the-
You said the date,
I
June.
think it was 19th, I'm pretty sure.
around then.
Okay.
And actually, then it's to promote the play that we're putting together about Joe Nutt and the Opera House.
Okay.
And that's gonna be in October,
All right.
but, so the names, we need to get the list of the names of people that you know that are still
Yeah.
around.
Well, as a matter of fact, on the first weekend in June at Tarleton, the Tarleton drama group is called the Tarleton Players. And they're still really, even the ones from way back.
Mhm.
And they do a gathering at whatever that big old restaurant is at the edge of town.
Jacob
Edge of
Gordon.
Tarleton.
City Lights or some kind of.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, they do it there, and I've gone the last couple of years. I got invited because I worked with all them, and a slew of those people are at that. So that's a grand place to.
Yeah,
Get
to
the word
their
out.
names.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
And
So what's the anniversary this year? Be
45th, I believe.
45th, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 75. I need to tell y'all one. Joanne was. I don't remember. There was something to do with the lobby, and Joe wanted a plaque or a bust of himself. And she said, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Well, no, I think after all I did, and she said, "Joe, I'm just gonna have to say no. Number one, we don't have the money to be spent on stupid stuff like that." And she said, if we did, I would more recommend the Joe Nutt Memorial Urinal than a bronze. How about that? Wow. So he started, the little short legs storming out that door. He was furious. No, we're not doing that.
I can,
And it never did get done. Oh, man.
That's funny.
when
Memorial Urinal.
we first had the house and we were restoring it and we still lived in Fort Worth,
Mhm.
and he came over to the house, Joe did, and said that he thought that we should donate the house to the Opera House.
Oh, I bet he did.
And so that they could use it for storage for costumes, and that we could get a better write-off on our taxes than we paid for the house.
We got that all figured out, didn't we?
I mean, the man that had an ego.
What kind of shape would your house be in now if that had happened?
Well, it would be standing.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me a bit. Just,
Yeah. It just-
Wow.
incredible.
Well, there were, well, maybe we don't want to talk about that, but frayed relationships, they're over all of this too. It was so
Yeah.
much hard work,
Yeah,
and everybody was so passionate
yes,
that it
Many
did
times.
impact relationships. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I remember one,
But they were all such different personalities that all came to work together. I mean,
yes.
it-
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing there wasn't a killing when you think about it.
because, well, Mary and I came about the same time to Granbury, and we bought a farm out on 51, and we were called River Trash.
Oh, yes,
Then.
I don't doubt it been.
And, it just, it was, I can't imagine what the pioneer people that were still here thought about a lady from New York that,
Oh, good heavenly.
Came in on, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Janine in the white
Yeah.
Cadillac.
yeah,
Well, and
Yeah.
Joanne coming down here, Joanne bought that house where Ian Moore lives now.
Yeah.
That was her first house here. No, that was her second. She bought one in Decorah. She bought that old house where, and that's a great house, it really is.
And he's letting it's deteriorated
That's
so
what I
badly.
figured, yeah. And at the time she had it, it was all electric. There was a fireplace, I think, in the living room and one in the bedroom. And the first winter, when the Opera House closed in December, it stayed closed until February 1st. Joanne went to New York and stayed and visited. She may have done some shows up there for all I know. She had a lot of friends up there and stuff. So she sort of put me and Marty Van Cleek in charge of the house. And we stayed over there a lot. We stayed, the bedroom had a fireplace. We just thought that was the coolest thing ever, you know. So we got the bright idea to take all of the wigs from the little wig shop and shampoo them all and get them. We did that in Joanne's bathtub. And we stopped that thing up until it almost, we had to call a plumber because.
Before she got home.
Yes. And she had plants. She had the most beautiful plants. So the heat had to stay on enough to keep the plants from freezing. And we, you know, when she got home, and in those days, and I had this tiny little apartment over here, so I know what my electric bill was. It was hideous. And for that old house, it was out of sight. Well, she nearly blew a gasket when she got home. And I said, yeah, it's kind of that way all over town. She said, well, I'm going to city council. I'm not putting up with this. And so she went to the next council meeting, and Hugh Robb was the mayor. Oh, my Lord. And he said, well, lady, what's your problem? And she said, my problem is this is highway robbery, and I'm not about to pay this bill. This is ridiculous. You can do something about it. I'm not having this. You're not going to treat me like this and get away with it. And he said, well, just don't get all worked up. He said, you don't have to pay that bill. And she said, really? And he said, no, we'd be more than happy to just come out there and cut it off. And she turned, and those eyes got about that big, and I'm not going to tell you what she said. But I wish I could remember who the other city council people were at the time, because most of them were fairly elderly, and they were old Granbury, and they were like, what did she just say?
I can imagine what she said.
And she turned that air blue. But she had to pay the bill, of course.
Yeah.
Awful.
Well, we thank you
for
so
coming.
much.
You're
So,
very
I
kind.
love this. I'm interested. What, somebody told me, and I think it was Jake Caraway, that there's a ton of stuff of Joanne's that's here.
Yes. there
What,
is.
do you know what's gonna happen to it, or what's gonna?
It's going to stay here.
Well, I know, but I mean,
We're going to make a display of it for for both the show and hopefully for the anniversary too.
for a good, okay.
Mhm.
I will volunteer right now to help if I can, because.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
And anything that you have, any pictures that you have, we could display or make copies of for here.
I'm trying to find those old playbills because I've got so many of them, and,
We have the first one,
okay.
but I don't even know. We have Joanne's scrapbook,
Oh, good.
and
Okay.
so
There were 2 or 3 scrapbooks in the theater that Doris Luton kept, and I've wondered a million times. They were like old-timey photo album type, big. And Doris kept those, and there was a little piece of furniture up on the balcony, and they were in it. And there were 3 of them that were full of stuff, and I have no idea what might have ever become of those.
we've got one, as far as I know.
Okay.
So,
There were 3, and I don't know.
I haven't even gone. We have some of her costumes, and again, I haven't really been able to go through everything that we have.
Well, that'd be great if
I would-
Steve could.
I
go
would
through.
love to
Yeah.
come and prowl and help out if I could. I would love every minute
well,
of it.
I'll let you know, because
Okay.
that's,
Do you remember when, long after they booted Joanne, and they hired those boys from New York to come down here, who didn't
Yes.
stay very long?
Yes.
Do you know that they went through that dorm? My posters were lining the walls of that dorm, and they went through there and ripped them to shreds and put another duster. All of my lobby posters.
They weren't very nice people.
No, they weren't. They're the ones that painted the arch gold.
Mhm.
That's another thing about Lou Brooks from the Nutshell. Lou's husband's name was Jess Brooks, and he built that plaster arch that you see a picture of him. He built that, designed it and built it himself. That was his line of work. Jess Brooks built the Fort Worth Water Gardens.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
That was one of his big claims to fame. But they came down here and he said, I'll take care of it, let me build you an arch. And that's, of course, long gone now, but those guys painted, that arch was just natural plaster. And when they got here, they painted it metallic gold and had lights. Tacky. So, anyway,
Yeah.
water under the bridge.
I'm glad they're gone, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a lot of characters.
Yes.
What was the guy's name that wanted to put the
Christian.
stuff on, yeah. and-
Did you want?
He wanted to do a Hollywood Walk of Fame in
Fame.
Granbury.
Oh, good. Was it,
No, it was a music Walk of Fame. He's a music producer.
From the square to where Fuzzy's is now.
wasn't Pat Stowe, was it?
No,
No.
it was
Okay.
Chris
Chris
Christian.
Christian.
Oh, okay.
He's still around.
Mhm. Pat Stoll's gone too,
Yeah, Pat Stoll passed away.
a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Thank you, Steve.
Characters
It was
is
so
right.
good to see you.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, we need to stay in touch.
I know.
Yeah. Association.
Mm-hmm.
When they had the first Christmas parade, Lighted Christmas parade, they wanted it to be non-commercial.
That was Diane who started that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And her preacher